Hey folks, welcome back. Today I am bringing you another Bad Teachers State Series episode as I continue on my quest to cover all 50 states. And in this episode, I am bringing you to Alabama. And first up in Alabama is former social studies teacher Carrie Witt, who in 2016 was arrested and charged with 2 counts of engaging in sex acts with 2 high school students. And what made this case rather interesting is Carrie Witt, she actually challenged the law in Alabama all the way to the state Supreme Court, primarily due to these students' ages at the time, which were initially reported as 17 and 18, and we'll get into some discrepancies there. Now, as if this weren't enough, another teacher's aide from another school, 25-year-old David Solomon, actually joined her in that challenge after he was charged with having sex with a 17-year-old student. It is a wild case with a lot of twists and turns, so let's get into it. And Carrie Witt, she taught at Decatur High School, and this is in Decatur, Alabama. And Decatur is a larger city, around 60,000 residents, and it's located about 25 miles southwest of Huntsville, Alabama. Space country, right, in Alabama. It's known as the River City, with the Tennessee River tributaries flowing right into the area. Now, not much at all really is known out there regarding Carrie Witt prior to her arrest in 2016. What we do know is at the time of her arrest, she was well established at the school. She had taught there quite a while, teaching history, psychology, and at the time of her arrest, social studies. Now, in addition to that, she also coached varsity golf and she coached junior varsity cheerleading at the school. So on March 17th of 2016, police, they received some information that a teacher, specifically Carrie Witt, was having sex with a student. Now, they did what they do. They opened an investigation. They started interviewing students. It was through these interviews, they discover, hold up, not only was one student involved, but 2 male victims. Again, one being 17 as it was originally reported and one being 18. So on March 21st of 2016, police investigate and they feel like they have enough information and proof to make an arrest. And that's just what they do. They arrest Carrie Witt and they charge her with 2 counts of a school employee engaging in a sex act or deviant sexual intercourse with a student under the age of 19, and that's going to play a big role here. Now, bond is set at $10,000. Now, it's notable that in Alabama, the age of consent is 16, but this specific statute, a person of authority, keep that in mind, that makes it a felony regardless of whether you consent or not. You're 17, you consent. It's like many of the cases we cover. You can't consent to someone that is in a position of authority over you, like a teacher. And as I said, this law would play a very key role in this case. So Witt, at this time of her arrest, she's 42 years old. Attractive, very attractive looking woman. Not someone you would think would be chasing kids around. So she gets arrested. She bails out. This is on March 22nd of 2016. And she, at this point, is facing 20 years in prison. And another point of fact, at the time of her arrest, she was the 3rd local coach arrested for screwing around with kids. Now, remember, she was a golf coach as well as a teacher, but she was the 3rd locally to get arrested in just a 2-week time period, with the first being a local assistant football coach, the second also being some sort of football coach. In less than 2 weeks, y'all, Decatur, Alabama was realizing quickly they had a problem at their school. So a week later, the Alabama Senate actually takes note of all this going down in the Decatur area, and a bill was introduced. And essentially, this bill was promoted throughout the state of Alabama as a requirement of teachers to take a refresher course on, get this, not having sex with students. I mean, for sure, something that on the surface seems like it's worth doing, but on that same thought process, it seems kind of ridiculous that it would even be necessary to have a freaking course on not having sex with the students you teach in high school and younger grades. Kind of tells you how much of an issue this was becoming in the state of Alabama. Now, on May 3rd of 2016, there were some conflicting reports that came out when it was reported by police that the two students that Witt was actually having sex with were both 18 at the time. And look, it doesn't change any of the charges because the state law states any student under 19. Really, it's just semantics, but for sure, it's important to be accurate, and we're going to have another accuracy issue with the ages as we go along. Now, it also comes out this day that while Witt was suspended pending an investigation, she was suspended with pay, which I found very interesting. Apparently, Decatur, Alabama schools, they had some sort of, I don't know if I call it a policy, but it was definitely the way that they operated, in which if you're charged with some sort of crime, you have to be convicted before they will stop paying you. And this will play a key role in the story in just a bit. Now, in the midst of that, the bill that I mentioned a few minutes ago, it was introduced, and it's pretty short and to the point, so I'm going to read quickly just the highlights of what it stated. And it was actually written by Senator Ward in Alabama. And the highlights of it are as follows. It says, a bill to be enacted related to public K through 12 education to establish the Educator-Student Interaction Training Act. 1 hour of training regarding appropriate and inappropriate interaction between educators and students. 1 whole hour. The overwhelming majority of educators in public schools of the state are dedicated professionals who comply themselves accordingly. However, an increasing number of incidents have been reported in recent years where educators have had inappropriate contact with students both in person and through social media and in the context of discipline and inappropriate relationship. Another key point it says is the Alabama Education Association shall cooperatively develop and disseminate training regarding appropriate and inappropriate interaction between educators and students. At a minimum, the training shall include instruction on state law, state and local education policies, and best practices regarding all of the following. And it says sexual or romantic contact between educators and students. 2, social media interaction between educators and students. 3, interaction between educators and students outside of a school setting. 4, corporal punishment and other disciplinary measures. And 5, the use of physical restraint in maintaining order in the classroom. So that became an act inside of the state of Alabama that they were going to mandate an hour of training. And hey, look, any training is great. I don't know how effective that really is. I mean, it's not real hard to understand what's appropriate and inappropriate, but at least they did something. I'll give them credit for that. So while that bill is being considered, more information was coming out on Carrie Witt. And the fact that she was still getting paid during this investigation. Now, the superintendent explained to the media that Carrie declined to resign after she was arrested, and policy dictated she would have to be fired for cause to not get paid, meaning convicted. As I told you earlier, it was kind of the process that this school district used. It's a weird policy, but I mean, there you have it. It also came out that during these instances of sex that she allegedly had with these students, they had occurred the prior year to her arrest, with one student during the spring of 2015 and another student during the fall of 2015. Now, the concern over Witt was reported by a school employee, and that is what actually sparked the investigation into what was going on. So on April 4th of 2016, a real shocker hit when Carrie Witt's attorney files a motion, and in this motion, he challenges the teacher-student law, and he calls it unconstitutional. And this is probably the most important part of this entire case. So I'm going to review the high points for you. I'm not going to bore you with the legalese, if you will, that's involved in this motion, but I will cover just a little bit of it that I think is very important. And it starts out with a statement of facts, and it redacts both of the students' names, but it goes on to say we're high school students at Decatur High School. Both had been a student in a class taught by Witt at Decatur High School. And then it says both were 17 years old at the time of the alleged act. So you see here where we've got some age discrepancies. Now, this is a court motion. I would be apt to believe what it says in this motion, that both were 17, but there you have it. And it goes on to say both suffer from no mental defect, were not at any time mentally ill or physically incapacitated, and both maintain Witt in no way exerted authority over, enticed, or pressured them to enter into relationships. And then one of the two students, name redacted, has already graduated from Decatur High School and is no longer enrolled as a high school student, which is irrelevant in this situation because when she was taking part in these sexual instances, this person was in high school. So then this attorney goes on and kind of makes an argument here, and it starts out by quoting the statute as it reads prior to him making an argument. And it says 13A 681, the statute, as follows. A person commits the crime of a school employee engaging in sex act or deviant sexual intercourse with a student under the age of 19 if he or she is a school employee and engages in sex acts or deviant sexual intercourse with a student regardless of whether the student is male or female. And then it says in bold, consent is not a defense to charge under this section. As used in this section, sex act means sexual intercourse with any penetration, however slight. Emission is not required. Then it says, as used in this section, deviant sexual intercourse means any act of sex gratification between persons not married to each other involving the sex organs of one person and the mouth or anus of another. So in these charges, that tells you that there was either some anal sex going on or some oral sex going on. The crime of a school employee engaging in a sex act or deviant sexual intercourse with a student is a Class B felony, it says. It also says, additionally, the statute provides that for purposes of this article, school employee includes a teacher, school administrator, student teacher, safety or resource officer, coach, or other school employee. Conversely, statute provides that a person over the age of 16 who is not mentally defective, mentally incapacitated, or physically helpless is capable of giving consent to sexual conduct. Under Alabama law, anyone 16 age or older is technically not a child, but is one capable of consenting to sex. The addition of statute to the existing scheme of sex crimes unconstitutionally intrudes into the private relationship of school employee to screen his or her sexual partners based not on capacity to consent, but based on enrollment status. The state allows that a person 16 years of age or older may consent to sexual activity with anyone except a school employee. And at this point, he's making his argument. The state allows the school employees may choose sexual partners from anyone over 16, provided the person is not enrolled as a student. The state does not stop its inquiry at the schoolhouse doors or school-related functions or activities, but barges into the bedrooms and private spaces of a school employee to see if any of his or her personal time is spent in a relationship with someone enrolled as a student. The state makes no inquiry as to whether the relationship was injurious to the student or influenced or manipulated to acquiesce to any sexual contact. the state does not inquire into any facts surrounding the relationship, but imposes strict liability upon school employees and no other profession to choose all love interests from those over age 19 or from school dropouts over 16. The state might have easily amended the age of consent to 19 or provided harsher sentences for any party who coerces consent by abuse of authority, but instead chose to unconstitutionally intrude upon the privacy of school employees. Privacy rights, including sexual autonomy, are among those guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. So all of that legalese, which I know is kind of hard to keep up with, he's basically saying, hey, he quotes the initial statute and that's what the law says, but it's actually unconstitutional because you're getting into the private life of someone and moreover, the private sexual life of someone. And that's a reach, right? He's reaching there. He's doing his job and trying to do it well and kind of make an argument against a law that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. So the next big move to occur over this case occurs September 16th of 2016. Witt actually gets indicted by a grand jury on the charges that she was arrested on. And it's interesting and also plays a key role in this case that the very same day, another teacher, a teacher by the name of David Solomon, is also indicted. Now, totally separate cases, totally separate schools, as a matter of fact. But these two cases will intertwine as we go along. David Solomon of Huntsville, he was indicted for having sex with a 17-year-old female student while working at Falkville High School, which allegedly started while he was communicating with the student through Facebook. Now, fast forward to June of 2017, and even though she has been indicted by a grand jury, meaning Miss Witt, Witt continues to get paid, if you can believe that. As a matter of fact, since her arrest in March of 2016, she had been paid over $40,000 from the school system. And get this, due to teachers receiving a 4% raise during the time after her arrest, she also got the freaking pay raise. This teacher got a damn raise while being placed on leave for having sex with two male students. You cannot make that shit up. Now, this is the first time I have ever seen that. So not only that, but she was also allowed to stay on the school's health insurance plan. And remember that male teacher that I mentioned, David Solomon, and how he and Witt's case would intertwine? Well, they did intertwine around this point because he actually teams up with Witt. Remember that motion that I just read you challenging the constitutionality of their cases? He teams up with her on that, and they go to war with the state challenging the constitutionality. And that was a big time reach for her attorney, right? Well, guess what? They actually win that argument. And a judge dismisses both of their cases. You cannot make that up either. So I'm going to read you a short article that really covers it well. It's by a writer by the name of Eric Fleischauer. It is from the Decatur Daily newspaper, and it reads, headline, Morgan Judge Dismisses Sex with Student Cases, one involving Decatur High's Witt. It goes on to say, in an order that could have statewide ramifications, a Morgan County judge today dismissed charges against 2 defendants charged with violating a law prohibiting school employees from having sex with students. Circuit Court Judge Glenn Thompson ruled the law was unconstitutional as it applies to Carrie Witt, who at this time was 44, and a teacher at Decatur High School, and David Solomon, 27, who was a contract teacher at Faultville High School. Says, quote, this court acknowledges a disparity of power may inherently exist between a teacher-student relationship, but it clearly does not exist between every school employee and every student, regardless of where the student is enrolled. By eliminating the requirement that the state show a position of authority, grooming, abuse, coercion, or lack of consent, the state criminalizes behaviors outside the state's legitimate purposes. I couldn't believe it when I read that. Goes on to say Morgan County District Attorney Scott Anderson said he respectively disagrees with the court's ruling. He said the state attorney general's office and his office would file an appeal. Witt was charged with 2 counts of a school employee having sex with a student, was suspended from her position on March 21st of 2016, and continues to draw salary from the school system. Witt is accused of having sex with a male student who was 17 when the relationship started, and another male student who was 18, police have said. And obviously, there's that freaking discrepancy again. Witt's attorney, Robert Tootin, argued the students were not under her direct authority at the school and were above the state's legal age of consent, which is 16. Solomon was fired by the company he worked for after his March 29, 2016 arrest on 1 count of a school employee having sex with a student. Solomon, who lives in Huntsville, was accused of having sex with a 17-year-old female student. Hartsville Police Sergeant Alan McDermott said today Solomon taught at the same school which the student was enrolled. Quote, they met at the school but communicated through Facebook. Thompson dismissed the charges without prejudice, meaning the state can refile them. Quote, in order for justice to be served, Thompson wrote, the state must prove the defendant was actually in a position of authority over the victim and that position of authority was abused to obtain consent. Thompson wrote that in finding the law unconstitutional as applied to the defendants, this court does not endeavor to absolve any wrongdoing or excuse the defendants. Really? But you dismiss the whole freaking case. Wow. Now that is about as most wild a ruling as you will ever see. So, of course, the state ain't going to let this one go. As they said in that article, they start amping up for an appeal. But at this point, Witt and Solomon, for that matter, are completely out of trouble. Charges completely dropped, which just a week later, that appeal does get filed. This is on August 14th of 2017. All of this time, she was on the school's payroll. Now get this, by this time, despite being on leave, Witt had collected $89,713 in salary and benefits. So because this case was being appealed, Witt remained on the payroll, but she could not return back to the school pending that appeal. In that appeal, it drags on. By February of 2018, yet another pay raise. And it's not until August of 2018 the school, one day, they receive a letter. And that letter is from Carrie Witt. And I'm going to read that for you quickly. It says, Dear Dr. Douglas, and he was the head of the Decatur County Schools, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from my position as history teacher at Decatur High School effective immediately. It is unfortunate that an employment termination hearing is scheduled prior to my case being settled in a court of law. So they had a hearing set up to where they were looking to fire her, essentially. So it goes on to say, therefore, with much regret, I am forced to submit this request at this time. I am deeply saddened to resign from the school system that I called my work home for 20 years. as a dedicated employee and teaching leader. It is even more upsetting that I have not had a voice to defend my character against many unsubstantiated rumors and false allegations. Please view this letter as my response to the accusations against me. I deny having committed any crime or harm against a student, nor have I ever had an inappropriate relationship with a student. So she's not even taking responsibility for what she did here. I appreciate the opportunity given to me many years ago to serve as a teacher with the Decatur school system. Please share this letter with the school board and or termination committee. Sincerely, Carrie Witt. So she has resigned at this point. And that means no more money for Carrie Witt, and that appeal drags on. And by the point that she resigned, incidentally, the school had paid her $142,992 in salary and benefits. That wasn't all cash, but it was $100,000 in cash. And while being out on leave the entire time, and that is just unreal to me. And if you're in Alabama and you're listening to this, that ought to fire you up, because guess what? You paid that. The state doesn't have no money. That's all tax money, right? So it's not long after that, the Alabama Appeals Court, they rule on that appeal in which Carrie Witt and Solomon's charges were dropped. And guess what? They completely reverse the lower court's ruling on the charges against both Witt and Solomon, saying that it was unconstitutional for them both to be arrested. And the charges are then laid back on the table. Now, they're both scheduled for trial again. And in 2021, Witt, just days out from her trial, 2 days from her trial, she cuts a deal. She cops a plea. She knows she's in for some shit, and she was facing 20 years in prison. So she cops a deal because she's probably going to go to jail. And as part of that deal, she gets a 10-year prison sentence. Now, 18 months of that is actually in prison. Then it's followed by 18 months in what's known as a community corrections program, which is like a halfway house. And the rest of that was like a sentence, but it was suspended so she wouldn't have to be in prison for long. Now, as far as David Solomon, guess what? Nothing out there I could find. So I just don't know whatever happened with David Solomon. If you're listening and you do, please message me and let me know, and I'll keep my peeps updated on here. But there's one more surprise to this case. Remember that school had paid out over $142,000 in salary and benefits to Miss Witt. Well, they wanted that back. And in 2022, they actually sued Carrie Witt in court. And in the end, Carrie Witt is ordered to pay back $100,000 in restitution to Decatur district schools. And that's the right decision. And shout out to them for chasing that and getting it back so the taxpayers could get their money back. I thought that was great. But as of today, Carrie Witt is out of jail and in the probation phase of her sentence. She's required to register as a sex offender throughout her probation, which is approximately 5 more years. And there you have it. Now, on my bad teacher consequence scale, I do this with all my Bad Teacher State Series episodes. State of Alabama, you get a C- for the major screw up initially with this case. So there you have it. Another Bad Teacher State Series episode is beyond us, the state of Alabama. Not sure where I'm going to go next time I join you. I do have some other cases unrelated to bad teachers that I am working on currently that I'm going to be dropping. Got a bonus episode coming for all of my Patreon members. So I want to say that. Thank you so much. I can't tell you folks who support me on Patreon how much I love and appreciate you. I could not do this show without the support of my celebrity members on Patreon. I am blessed to have you, and I'm going to be ramping up some things just for you upcoming. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to support on Patreon, you can do so. We give commercial-free early releases every week. We do bonus episodes. We do quarterly gifts for our top-tier Patreon members. You can go to patreon.com/exposed podcast files to learn more. Literally, the opening tier on that page is $2.50 a week. That's it. And you get a ton of stuff with that. I think I have something like 200 episodes now up on that Patreon site. I also do Crime Wire Weekly, a video version of that I host with Kelly Jennings that I drop on Exposed Patreon. That's included in your membership. So that's a whole nother show that you're getting a video version of, and it's commercial free as well. So there's a lot of benefits, and I do that because I want you to feel like you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, and it helps to support this show. So thank you so much. And until next time for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.